Sarah's handle is Politicus Sarah. Welcome to Deadline DC, Sarah. Welcome. This is your second time on the show, and I'm glad you were brave enough to come back on after having been on with me before. Not everyone has the guts to do that. Thank you.
It was my pleasure to come back, and thank you for having me on this crazy ride we've been on.
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride. As probably people who listen to the intro know, I've got Donald Trump on the brain today. Today, I believe at about 5 o'clock Eastern Time, California will cast its electoral votes, which will put Joe Biden over the 270 mark he needs to become the next president of the United States. But the current president and his lackeys have a difficult time accepting that. And, there were some troubling events over the weekend. There were supporters demonstrating in Washington, D.C. They vandalized a couple of black churches, took down Black Lives Matters signs. A couple of people were stabbed in the melee. There was also a confrontation in Olympia, Washington, where someone was shot. I have this constant debate, Sarah, and I was wondering if you could help sort it through me. Are we, are, are we, losing our democracy in the United States? Am I overreacting? I mean, we've had incidents of violences before and disputes over presidential elections, but, it seems to me that the Trump refusal to accept the election results, we're in very dangerous and troubled waters, maybe a slippery slope. What's your take on this?
Well, I have to agree. I mean, I don't want to fearmonger people, but I think that we have to be realistic and look at what's going on. We have had these problems before, but they've never been coming from the top. We have a president who incites violence. He's been doing that since he has been in office, and he has now developed a very devoted cult. They heard those calls, and they are willing to take action. The one of the marches, their march in Washington on Saturday, that was attended by thousands, and I don't think that's quite really the crowd. Why we are all being governed by such a minority, I don't know. But they were saying we have to fight this election. It's bloodshed. They were equating Trump to Jesus, and using that trick that people do when, we saw Hitler use it very effectively, and I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler, but the tactic is the same, is to say an attack on Trump is an attack on us. And so every time somebody counts other people's votes, these folks are going to feel victimized by it, and they do. And you saw that. One of the women, the woman who came up in Michigan, was their star witness, who happens to be a criminal, a computer criminal. She was up there saying, they are diluting my vote. Your vote is not diluted when other people's votes are counted, right? So that is a problem. And then we have 126 House Republicans who joined the amicus brief to overturn certified votes of actual citizens. That's not normal, and that's not okay. I don't know. I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, and I think is really should be the topic of conversation, because I'm really tired of Trump taking up all the air, and so we can never group as a country. We can never get together and have dialogues about how to overcome what he's done, because he's always lobbing a new bomb into the middle of any discussion. Very effective tactic, so that we can never look at what's happening and get around it.
Okay, well, that leads me to another topic. we've got all sorts of danger signs, it seems to me, that foretell really tough times for Joe Biden's presidency. We don't know yet. We won't know until January 6th whether Joe Biden has a Democratic Senate majority to work with. If he doesn't, he's going to have a difficult time getting anything passed in the Senate, which will limit his ability to deal with the grave problems facing the nation. I've seen national polls last week that shows that anywhere from 75 to 80% of the Republicans in the nation don't accept the fact that he won the election. So my question is, how do you deal with this if you're Joe Biden? There's some major problems he has to solve as president, and with so many Republicans not even accepting the fact of his election, and maybe with Mitch McConnell in the driver's seat in the Senate, how does Joe Biden deal with that?
That's a great question. And I mean, one of the things that gives me a little bit of relief and a little bit of calm through this is that Joe Biden's been here before. He might be making all this pleasant talk about his good relationships with Republicans, but he was in the White House when Mitch McConnell and both the Republicans in the House and the Senate were obstructing President Obama for anything he wanted to do for the country and for the people. So he knows what's going on, and he knows that he's got to get around this somehow if he can. So, he does have I'm sure you've discussed it, and I think you he has a slew of executive orders he can do to undo some of the Trump damage. One of the good things that I think that he's done, in spite of the criticism he's gotten, is if you look at his cabinet, you can see that.
Okay, Sarah, we're going to have to go to break now. We'll continue this discussion with Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA, when we get back from these messages with more of Deadline DC with Brad.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling.
Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah's Twitter handle is Politicus Sarah, and that's POLITICUS SARAH. Let's continue the discussion about Mitch McConnell. It seems to me that Joe Biden has a couple choices. He can learn to deal with Mitch McConnell, which would mean if Joe Biden is going to get anything done, he'll have to compromise with Mitch McConnell, or he can go around Mitch McConnell. Now, he has some ability to do that with executive orders. I think the fact that he's president and has a large audience that Mitch McConnell doesn't have gives him the ability to speak to the nation and try to work around Mitch McConnell. And let's start with this question. How much should Joe Biden have to compromise with Mitch McConnell to get things through the Senate if he doesn't have a majority? A good example of how difficult I think the Biden-McConnell relationship is going to be is we can't even agree after months of debate to give Americans a pandemic relief package with jobless benefits, aid to first responders. We can't even get Mitch McConnell to do that. So how can Joe Biden get him to do anything else?
First of all, let's look at this COVID thing, and we see what was Mitch McConnell holding up everything for. He wants 5 years of business being completely exonerated and protected from any kind of accountability, forcing people pandemic without necessarily they're leaving the precautions for businesses up to them instead of insisting that people have ventilation and everyone wear a mask. They've left it up to the individual businesses to enforce this stuff sometimes too, and the people working the business, the frontline people working the businesses, And so what Democrats are dealing with now is how do we get anything, if we agree for this one check, if we're held, we're hijacked basically for this one check that people really need, but we have to give businesses 5 years of no culpability for anything. And clearly we don't see a lot of great actors there without regulation being held over their head. Where does that leave the American people? So Democrats are in a bad position, as they always are, with this Republican Party, this modern Republican Party that isn't really interested in legislating, and they're not really a policy-oriented party anymore. And a lot of what they are doing is all about keeping power, which is why they want to deny I don't know that that's why they're denying benefits to people, to an unemployment relief to people, but it is why they troll each Democratic president. They will troll Biden just like they trolled Barack Obama. What should Biden do? It is my opinion that Democrats already tried appeasing Republicans, and it doesn't work. We have seen no movement from Republicans, and I'm not suggesting we do have a bipartisan group of Republicans and Democrats who work together on COVID legislation that, Mitch McConnell would.
Let's continue that discussion, Sarah, because our radio audience is rejoining us. This is Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour, Sarah Jones, Editor-in-Chief of Politicus USA. If you'd like to contact Sarah, her Twitter handle is Politicus Sarah. That's POLITICUS SARAH. Let's take this example about the pandemic, which I think is an important issue. Essentially, what Mitch McConnell is willing to do is offer about, I believe, $1 trillion worth of pandemic aid in return for all sorts of protection for businesses, liability protections. Now, back in May, or even before that, the House of Representatives passed a bill, a relief bill that was 3 times as large. And so the question is, and I mean, this is a real vote that Democrats going to have to take. Do they take Mitch McConnell's deal of his economic package with the liability protection for business? Or what if the choice is either doing that or nothing? Which do Democrats do in the Senate?
Well, I know that yesterday that bipartisan group was again working on something, and the Democrats had compromised that they were willing to let go of local aid, which they feel is very important, and that would go to frontline workers, and it is really important. They were willing to come back to that and move forward by letting that sit there and wait, as long as we could get immediate relief to the people and give Republicans that, no, we're not going to do the state and local aid right now. That seems like a reasonable compromise. Will Mitch McConnell bring that to the floor? That's where we always run into this problem. And even some Republican senators were saying, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening with Mitch McConnell. So Democrats are always in this position about what to give up. And
it seems that way, yes.
Yeah, and what to give up. And it's to give up for the people. And then there's going to be the folks that are going to say, well, you want this relief for the people. How are you going to pay for it? I would say that we just passed this, $740 billion NDAA bill. No one asked that. No one asked where's that money coming from? And we have people in this country, who are going to starve. They're going to lose their home. They're going to be kicked out of their apartment. They shouldn't have to be in the situation of working in the middle of a pandemic that has had no federal coordination and no protection. So Democrats, again, they're in this situation. They've got to figure out what to give up. Until Democrats find some way of, you see, this is the other thing. They have to choose, are they going to legislate for the people, or are they going to do what Republicans do, if only to hold Republicans accountable so that Republicans learn that there's consequences for what they're doing? That's the only way these Republicans are ever going to stop doing this, is if it costs them something.
Well, what will, what can Democrats do to get to that point?
I mean, because they really could, they don't have a lot of options. But one thing, we've already talked about and touched on a little bit, is that Joe Biden can do the same kind of executive order flurry, and we know he's planning on doing that Donald Trump did. He's going to take flack for that. Everybody's going to say, oh, you're expanding executive power. I have written extensively against expanding executive power, but we are at the point now, and I did that under President Obama, but we are at the point now where this is the only chance that we have to protect our democracy. And we are at that point. I see several Republicans acknowledging that, not elected Republicans, mind you, but Republicans of good conscience and good faith. We are at a crossroads here. One of the things they could do, and I don't think they're going to do this, but those 126 House Republicans who signed on to that amicus brief to overturn the votes, legitimate votes of millions of people in this country, could be sanctioned. They could even have, refusal to seat them. That's never going to happen. But it's a good thing to have out there. We did have a Democrat call for that. And when I shared that story,
Bill Pascal of New Jersey,
exactly, yes, and exactly, when I shared that story, I had these conservatives writing me saying, "Well, wait till Republicans get in the House." And what I wanted to say was, we don't have to wait for them to get in the House. Their reaction to grabbing power and punishing Democrats isn't about what the Democrats did before that. It's never a reaction to that. If there's any power that they can grab, they will. They've already proven that by trying to overturn this election, not just once, but we've had the Trump administration, 59 failed attempts, court attempts to overturn this election. I think they've lost any moral high ground to make the argument.
And many of those decisions were rendered by Republican-appointed judges, and even in some cases, Trump-appointed judges.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. There's, I think, widespread agreement that there are certain things that executive orders that Joe Biden's going to issue very quickly after he becomes inaugurated on January 20th, to rejoin the Paris Environmental Accords, to rejoin the World Health Organization, to basically put the DACA program back into existence for young children who were brought to this country by their parents. What other executive orders would you urge Joe Biden to move on very quickly?
Well, to undo the Trump undermining of the Affordable Care Act, to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. And then
that's Joe Biden by executive order could extend Medicaid to hundreds of thousands of Americans by executive order.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing that I think he's willing to do that actually as well. I see a lot of criticism of Joe Biden as a moderate, and I don't really see him that way. I think he comes across as a moderate, and nor do I think he's some flaming liberal, but I think that he has the same goals that liberals do, and it's all about how he gets there. But, he was one of the first people to come out with an environmental bill way back, before that was sort of the cool thing to do. I think he cares a lot about the people, and I think he's going to use that executive power.
He was one of the original sponsors of the Violence Against Women Act, too.
Yes, he was, and that act actually saved my life. And so I've talked to many women who have been in that situation, and it's been very important. We have 3 women murdered every day in this country by a former partner. So we need all the help we can get with that.
Okay, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. Sadly, we're out of time. We hope you can join us again. Our guest in this half hour has been Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Have a happy holiday, Sarah, and we look back to having you after the first of the year. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, Dad.